All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Grab a seat. As university history students, you're trained to look at the past through a critical lens, right? You're taught to question the accepted narratives. Well, today, as your resident music historian, I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this explainer that is going to completely challenge your preconceived notions about 1960s pop music. We're looking at a truly fascinating intersection today: the collision of cold, hard genomic data science, the unstoppable force of Beatlemania, and a 47-year-old Las Vegas crooner named Dean Martin.
Here is the roadmap for today's explainer: the 1964 musical revolution, the genomic data revelation, the crooner's anomaly, blending tradition with trends, refusing the disco craze, and finally, the homogeneity myth busted. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. The 1964 Musical Revolution, setting the stage. Now, I want you to pause for a second and critically consider this. Who really drove the musical stylistic revolution of 1964? You know the standard story. American pop music was totally stagnant, teenagers were bored to tears, and then boom, four boys from Liverpool step off a plane at JFK and single-handedly rewrite the musical landscape overnight. But did a single band, no matter how iconic, truly drag an entire industry into a new era all by themselves? Or is history, as it usually is, just a little more complicated than the legends suggest?
Well, a recent absolutely groundbreaking study out of London dismantles that foundational myth. It challenges this deeply held belief about the Beatles' unique, solitary, revolutionary impact on American pop. The reality? A much broader, stylistic pop music revolution was already well underway before the Beatles even set foot in the States. Did they ride the wave? Absolutely, and they were brilliant at it. But they didn't generate the wave themselves.
Which brings us to Section 2, the genomic data revelation: hard science meets pop.
To understand how we know this, we literally have to look at the hard science. Researchers aren't just relying on old music critics' opinions or fuzzy memories anymore. They are applying genomic data analysis methods, the exact same statistical models used to track genetic mutations in evolutionary biology, to the Billboard charts. And they looked at 17,000 songs. 17,000! That is just an unprecedented scale. They fed 30-second clips of over 17,000 hit songs, spanning a half-century from 1960 to 2010, straight into an algorithm. They categorized every single track based on its harmonics and timbre. Basically, they mapped the DNA of popular music to see exactly how and when it mutated. And the data algorithms identified three major stylistic revolutions in that 50-year span: 1964, 1983, and 1991. The critical point here is that the data explicitly proves the 1964 revolution, that massive shift in chords, rhythms, and tones, was already actively shifting the American charts in late 1963. The environment was already changing. The Beatles were simply the ultimate apex predators, perfectly adapted to thrive in it.
All right, Section 3, the crooner's anomaly, a micro case study.
Let's pivot from the macro-level data to a massive micro-level anomaly from that exact same year. Enter Dean Martin. By the summer of 1964, Dean was a 47-year-old traditional crooner singing these soft, moody, Vegas-style ballads. Crucially, he hadn't had a hit record in 6 years. Pretty much every music executive in America had written him off as a relic of a bygone era. But Dean had a 13-year-old son, Dean Paul. And like literally every other teenager in America in '64, Dean Paul was totally obsessed with the Beatles. The tension in the house was palpable, folks. His son thought his dad's music was just dead garbage. So one night at the dinner table, Dean Martin looks at his son and makes this very quiet, very serious promise. He says, "I'm gonna knock your pallies off the charts." His son just smirks and rolls his eyes. After all, the Beatles had an absolute stranglehold on the radio. But on August 15, 1964, Martin executed an impossible coup. Look at this. At number 4, you've got the Beatles with A Hard Day's Night. And sitting right there at number 1, Dean Martin with Everybody Loves Somebody. Against all demographic odds, right in the teeth of the massive British invasion wave, a 47-year-old crooner successfully hijacked the American pop charts.
Section 4, Blending Tradition with Trends, the Artistic Strategy.
As historians, we really have to ask, how did a seemingly washed-up crooner manage this massive statistical anomaly? It wasn't magic. It was a highly specific artistic strategy. Working with a young, hungry producer named Jimmy Bowen, they took a really unique approach. Step 1. They resurrected a totally forgotten ballad from 1947 that Frank Sinatra and Peggy Lee had already recorded without any success. Step 2. Bowen and arranger Ernie Freeman slopped a heavy, contemporary, rock-influenced backbeat onto the track. But here's step 3, the genius part. Dean Martin didn't try to sing like a rock star. He maintained his traditional, laid-back, sleepy vocal croon. He blended his classic style with contemporary trends to perfectly cross generational divides. And finally, step 4, they let the audience do the work.
And I say they let the audience do the work because his own record label, Reprise, had completely given up on it. When the label stopped promoting the single, Dean's only response was to shrug and say, "Ain't that a kick in the head?" And he literally went back to the golf course. But then, a late-night DJ in New Orleans played it at 2 a.m. just to fill some airtime. The phone lines absolutely exploded. Then it hit Worcester, Massachusetts, then Chicago. The audience fundamentally pulled this song to #1 organically. It proved that the public's appetite was far wider than any of the industry executives believed.
Moving on to Section 5, Refusing the Disco Craze, Enduring Brand Management.
Now, the ultimate test of brand management came later. As the 60s turned into the 70s, the musical landscape radically shifted again. How did Dean Martin navigate those shifts to maintain his brand? It's a vital lesson in longevity. As the 70s wore on, so many of Martin's contemporaries desperately chased fading trends. They squeezed themselves into polyester suits and recorded these awkward disco tracks that severely compromised their artistic legacies. Dean Martin's strategy? He bowed out gracefully. He completely refused to subject himself or his audience to disco. It's an absolute masterclass in personal brand preservation. You don't have to win every single era to remain a legend.
But that doesn't mean he stopped evolving. Instead of chasing fleeting pop trends, he adapted subtly. He pivoted toward country music influences, a genre that naturally accommodated his storytelling style and his vocal tone. He released albums like the 1983 Nashville Sessions and even hit the top 40 country charts with a Conway Twitty duet. He worked consistently with that same producer, Jimmy Bowen, who was now a heavy hitter down in Nashville. He ensured his relevancy by finding a completely different market that respected his core identity.
Which brings us to our final synthesis. Section 6, the homogeneity myth busted.
So, how do these two threads, the macro-level genomic data and the micro-story of a Vegas crooner, actually connect to give us a truer picture of musical history? Well, a really common complaint you hear today is that pop music all sounds the exact same, that it's become incredibly homogeneous. But the genomic data explicitly proves that chart-topping music has not become more homogeneous over time. And Dean Martin's success perfectly embodies those findings. The fact that a 47-year-old traditional crooner could sit at #1, sandwiched right between the Supremes, the Drifters, and the Beatles, proves that pop music is a landscape of incredibly complex, evolving heterogeneity. It's an ecosystem that supports completely diverse species of sound simultaneously.
Dean Martin's career spanned a staggering 55 years. He didn't survive that long by staying exactly the same, but he also didn't survive by completely abandoning who he was. He showed us how staying true to your core identity, while subtly adapting to underlying rhythmic shifts, is the ultimate guarantee of longevity. He proved that even in the face of the greatest cultural shifts in history, a kept promise and a really good song can still break through the noise.
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on as you leave today's explainer. If genomic data can completely rewrite the history of 1964, proving the revolution started well before the British invasion, and if the data vindicates the unlikely triumph of a Vegas crooner, what current pop music myths that we firmly believe today will tomorrow's data completely disprove? Think critically about the music you listen to right now, folks. History is rarely as simple as the legends tell us. Thanks for joining in, and keep questioning the narrative.